of With a number of COVID-19 cases on the rise throughout the state of Texas, there have been more and more requests regarding the upcoming school year. While we still don't have all the answers, we'll be publishing episodes weekly to provide what information we do have and keep you updated on the 2021 school year. I'm Andrew Kim, the Superintendent of Schools for the Comal Independent School District. Joining me today are our Executive Director for Special Education and Special Services, Michele Martella, and also our Director of Special Education, Shanie Bowers. I'm so glad that you guys are here. We've been talking about this topic of special education for a while and talking about the fact that we need to do a podcast here soon. And so we have finally come together to do so, and I'm really excited about it. And I know this is an important topic to many out there. First, though, I would just want to say you guys have done a fantastic job. The whole entire special ed department, as well as the folks who are involved with that. Our principals, of course, working with that, and teachers. But certainly our reputation of special ed has gained a lot of support. So thanks to certainly the work that you guys have initiated and started. With that in mind, though, we're all facing this new normal, and it's a tough one. Let's not, sugarcoat that, right? So we all understand how important special ed is. There's been a lot of discussion and talk about school districts, even though they may go 100% remote, allowing some special ed kids to come in because of the circumstances some of our students are in, from a mental side of it, social emotional side of it, issues with students, and then, of course, just having services related to some of our special ed needs students. So there's a bunch of things to talk about, but just kind of talk about, Michele, just what do you think is going to be different for you guys, or is there going to be any different? I mean, what do you foresee as a differences from last year, what we all know? Because right now, there are a lot of parents and a lot of teachers are imagining, oh my gosh, what is it going to look like? So paint the picture for me in terms of what you think is going to be.
Sure. We learned a lot last 9 weeks, what we could and couldn't do, and we have some updates for what we think we can offer for services.
And you mean 9 weeks of the last school year?
The last school year. Yes, and it was a complex time, and so we have put some intentional thought into what services can look like on campus, to include things like increased personal protective care, especially for as we do personal care in our life skills and PPCD classrooms. We're also considering if a family has chosen to stay at home and do remote instruction, and if the virtual platform isn't going to work for them for like speech or for counseling, that they could actually come in just for those services, and we would discuss that through an ARD committee. So trying to be more individualized and customized. Another component of that is when we are doing our remote instruction, making sure that it's more individualized, so we can get that daily engagement from our students. And sometimes that's going to require a lot of animated work and pre-teach and during the lesson, bringing those kids in a different way.
Yeah.
So we're looking forward to how this can be more intentional.
It's almost like now the individualized education plan, or IEP, truly becomes individualized in many ways, right? I mean, it's almost like this situation has given us an opportunity to make sure that we do individualize, customize situation. Obviously, remote is going to be completely different than obviously on campus, and we will have special ed parents who choose remote for their special ed children, and for good reasons, as well as those who are going to choose on campus for good reasons as well too. So, but for us, we have to now sort of pivot to providing that to options, and that's going to be tough with always limited resources in that regard. You mentioned considerations. So what are these things like PPE equipment and things of that nature, protective gear for students and our staff members, teachers? That's not a consideration. We're going forward with that. I mean, that is like definitive.
Absolutely. The teachers in our PPCD settings and our life skills settings will be wearing clear face shields. When we have situations where we're doing personal care, they will be wearing gowns, and then they can change back into their traditional clothes.
You're talking about teachers?
Yes,
yeah.
The teachers. For sure, we have lots of clear math situations for our kids who may have auditory impairments, and we want to be able to do the speech reading situations. We've also even purchased some UV light wands for our specialized settings. And so just another layer, if you will, we're going to continue with the same protocols the district is using for disinfecting and hand hygiene.
We do have
social distancing.
quite a bit of cleaning supplies.
But we're going to add that extra layer for these. Sometimes there's just materials that are more difficult to wipe down, and so this will just be another opportunity for cleaning.
And we're also right now in the process of, resourcing and sourcing quite a bit more of sort of this protective, plexiglass things to put into classrooms, especially with some of our special ed setting classrooms.
We are looking at how we can create space, and then how can we create that with plexiglass. We've set up some systems for our folks who do evaluations for students, and so that's safe for the evaluator and the student, but then it doesn't invalidate any of the testing norms so that can continue.
Some of our students will have a very tough time just keeping that face covering or a mask. So how are we going to take care of that? I mean, what do you foresee happening there? Because I know a lot of teachers are really worried and concerned about the enforcement of making sure the masks are on. And I would tell you that I truly believe that other than a vaccine being available worldwide, I think right now our best chance of making sure that we mitigate the spread is a face covering, right? And so how are we going to make that work? And that's going to be challenging.
It is a challenge. I think it's one that we can be creative with some solutions. Certainly there are going to be some children that we're going to have to teach tolerance for a mask, and they may be able to wear a mask a certain amount of time, and then we're going to reinforce and try to increase the time that they can actually tolerate a mask.
Yeah.
But when there's times that they need a break and it's just not possible, then we're going to create some social distancing.
Yeah.
There's some ways we can do social distancing that aren't actually about geography. We can let a kid transition a little sooner or after the whole peer situation of transitioning and allow them to have an opportunity. If they really can't wear a mask, that way they're not impacting others, and they still get to go where they need to go. So I think we have social stories and visual supports and reinforcement to help encourage the use of the mask, but we're also realistic. There's some children that it's going to take some time for this to become part of their skill set.
Good, yeah. And I think that we're going to have to probably have talk with a lot of parents about this. I don't want to just sound like, oh, you don't want to wear it, just stay home then, right? So that's not an easy answer in my opinion, or that's not necessarily the answer, because I know parents are wanting services and support for their children. And so trying to balance this out of providing support for kids who need it, and then trying to also protect our teachers and our kids from this horrible virus situation, boy, it's not dovetailing well in that regard. But certainly I think parents have that decision that you could go remote learning if there is a situation where a student is really having a difficult time wearing a mask or a face covering, by and large, so that we can kind of work with that individually perhaps. So Shanie, I know that we have, and Michele mentioned this, multitude of different settings or programs that we offer. Let me just ask you this, what's one setting or program that you are worried about right now the most? I mean, we have PPCD, we have life skills, we have our behavior settings, we have our, inclusive settings and so on. So is there any one particular right now that you're like worrying about the most?
I think that truly every situation is going to have some barriers and some constraints and some things we're going to have to work through. But I guess one really comes to mind is the little PPCD, the preschool program. Those types of classrooms, the way they learn is very interactive, very close in proximity, doing a lot of centering, kitchen centers and dressing centers and all of these different things that do add some different layers of still getting those students what they need in terms of learning, but then still being able to keep a safe environment for others. So that's something we're definitely working through. And I know it would apply to pre-K, probably kinder age. There's kind of like this cluster of classrooms that kind of function that same way. Yeah,
that's going to be a challenge. Is there something sort of, early communication, early kind of type of thing we can do with get our parents and folks prepared for that by any chance? Because I think that initial shock of just becoming like, this is how it's going to be, is right now somewhat not as well known, perhaps. I don't know. Is there something that we will communicate that on that, you think?
Yes, we do have a tool that's going to be launched, and it actually gives some information where basically it's going to talk about the different types of learning that can happen, whether it's on a remote situation or whether it's on campus. It's going to talk about the use of PPE in these types of classrooms, like PPCD, life skills, those kinds of things, whether they're going to get instruction through a Google Classroom or a Seesaw platform, those kind of things if they're doing remote instruction. There are going to continue to be, if they are in remote, instructional calls, those kind of things where they'll have some kind of direct help if they've chosen the remote format for their student. In class, I would say we're going to do our best that we can to make school still look like school and the classroom still look like the classroom with center learning and those kind of things. We're working closely with our teachers on that. I would also add that we did have the opportunity during summer instruction to have some of our teachers instruct through the remote format in a different way than what it kind of looked like what Michele was referring to. That last 9 weeks of school looked very different than what maybe expectations might be this year. And so we kind of had that time during summer instruction where we were able to kind of bridge that and get a different perspective on what that could look like, some things we needed to put in place with a smaller group. So we've really been tapping into those teachers to get information from them on kind of what worked, what needed to change, those kind of things. So I think definitely just communicating with our teachers and then kind of shifting and readjusting as needed. We're going to have to continue doing that.
Yeah. And I think in a normal, I guess a regular school year, there's some level of understanding about how that might go as a result of us all being familiarized with the context, right, of the school building and all that. But it's so dramatically different as a result of the protocols that we have in place as a school district. I'm wondering that, there might be even an opportunity to maybe virtually provide and look-see for parents in terms of what that could look like. So that might be something we might want to work on and put it out there maybe in some sense.
Jordan Unsworth is our coordinator for behavioral services. She's working with the behavior team, and they're creating some orientation videos for students, much like the way some of our principals are creating some videos. And these videos are going to be very unique to the social skills instruction and onboarding students for what to expect. And that's going to be released to families individually by their behavior teacher.
Okay.
So that's a way that they can kind of get a preview of what that will look like.
Right.
We're going to launch some resources on the Comal Parent Center that includes a graphic that will have narration of what these programs could look like, either remotely or on person. But then there's going to be some individual teachers reaching out and creating some, there's some picture slideshows of this is what I look like with a mask and this is what school will look like. So that particular child sees their teacher and the way that that classroom may look. And they're going to show we have most of our same furniture, or maybe even introduce the idea that we're going to do a lot of station teaching.
Yep.
And so we may have groups, and you're going to rotate between the paraprofessionals and the special ed teachers. And sometimes one of our groups may even be in a different location to help with social distancing.
I will tell you from a teacher's perspective, I think the question will come up naturally in that discussion is to make sure that we cohort them relatively together as much as possible, because obviously we will have potential case management situations. Obviously that's a reality that we're going to all have to face. And so if we have to quarantine anybody for X number of days, then we need to make sure that that cohort of small numbers of students are sort of segmented out. I do think that's going to be a little bit, obviously difficult for secondary campuses, but we're going to need to really track that, I think, in many ways. And I know that's an extra thing that we're going to have to worry about. But I think that's something we need to think through and talk about quite a bit.
We've had a special ed teacher focus group work with us over the summer, and they provided us feedback. We listened, we gave them feedback and asked for what they thought. And the cohorting came up, even yesterday we talked through it, and they were very positive that they thought this could work. Okay. And they had some creative solutions for that. Yeah. So they were encouraged by that.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that. I know you guys have been meeting with a lot of our teachers on this issue, so that's good. The issue about then in special ed, of course, is how do we handle testing our meetings and meetings of that nature? I mean, any thoughts on that right now in terms of what we're going to put out as a guidance?
Sure. For our families who choose to be remote learners, they will have an IEP amendment that first 9 weeks to create a remote learning plan. TEA calls that a contingency plan. It doesn't have an expiration date. It's just for when they're ready to come back to the campus. If a family wants an in-person ARD committee meeting, that is absolutely can be accommodated, but we're going to continue to offer virtual ARD meetings to families as a way for convenience, so maybe they don't have to take off work, but if they want that in person, whether they're an on-campus or a remote learner, they can still have that ARD committee.
Okay.
Testing will continue. We did some testing of students for reevaluations and initial evaluations. We did that over the summer at our 7 SAC campuses.
Yep.
And so we will be having some ARDs to consider those eligibilities. Testing will continue on campus. We really do believe that an in-person evaluator and child is the most authentic way to capture a child's learning
Sure.
profile.
We don't want to create a plan that's misdiagnosed because of the issue, the virtual platform issues.
We didn't want to take any shortcuts with that.
Right.
So we will, families will begin to getting calls again to schedule appointments to come to campus for their child. If they're remote or on campus, the family will be a part of that.
And, I think it's important for everybody to know that these guidelines are not just state guidelines, TEA, or Texas Education Agency, but that's federal guidelines. Special ed is so federally protected, federally driven at the federal government level that these, and that so far, since the pandemic began, the federal government has been unrelenting on the special ed portion, which I think is a good thing, but it does pose a challenge in terms of meeting these expectations by law. So I think you guys have done a good job thinking through all of that. So what I'm hearing then is we're going to be offering just about everything we offer. It's just that we're going to have to really dance around in terms of how it will look for remote students who choose that, which we are appreciative of, as well as those who are on campus students, which we're also appreciative of. So it's just really a matter of sort of staffing to make that work. I think the greatest challenge, though, as I'm thinking about it, listening to you guys talk, is this notion of time issues. And I think, and here's how I'm thinking about time to make sure that we do it right for the kids and right by kids to the expectations that we create through the individualized education plans, IEPs, and time for our teachers, to be quite frank, meaning teachers to be able to do what they need to do, get some time off, make sure they're not, doing our meetings at 8 o'clock at night. So that's unreasonable, right? And so that's not our expectations. So, but still time of trying to traverse from remote to on-campus students to make that work, it's going to be a challenge, I think.
It will. We have some ideas where we think that there can be some live casting from all of our settings. Especially resource and inclusion.
So that's a live casting simultaneously going on with your live kids versus remote kids, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then even if maybe the PPCD teacher is doing a morning meeting,
yep,
she can film that and then she can show that to the
sure,
remote team as well.
Right.
So there's those opportunities, and we're thinking of creative ways to capture
yep,
peer videos and allow for that natural interaction that's happening on campus to also be shared back.
Yeah, it's almost like carrying we're not doing this, but it's almost like carrying a GoPro stick that's filming you yourself and then putting it up while you're doing the action that you're doing, right? And so it's going to be challenging, I think, in that regard, very challenging. I mean, I'm doing that on a day-to-day basis right now of having to meet with live people, right? It's crazy that I'm saying that, but, we're meeting face to face, but I'm also having others Zoom in or Google Meeting in the meetings. So I'm having to sort of traverse between the two worlds and just being cognizant about working with people that I see face to face, as well as those who are kind of in the monitor. So just trying to. Now I got to tell you, I've gotten used to it. So it's there's a new routine that I'm going through, but I think there's gonna be an initial shock to the situation about this situation that's going on.
We think so too. We're very encouraged by what we learned from students who participated in extended school year this summer with their teachers.
Yeah.
When they were able to schedule it at a time, the engagement increased a lot. When it was the teacher and maybe the parent and the student engaging together. There was a very strong connection. There was a good connection when students at home had the same type of material that the teacher was modeling.
Yep.
It made a big difference. So we think there's some creative ways to engage children through virtual formats, and then also having the peers modeling the same thing is super helpful.
I see.
So presenting that to kids who are remote learners, timing was very critical on how successful they were in the summer.
Okay. I think we're going to have to probably come back and do another in-depth discussion about certain programs, certain settings. I think, what I wanted to cover today was just a broad stroke of what special ed program is going to be available. Just trying to paint a picture. Yes, we are going to have it. Here's what it could look like. Here's what it's going to look like, certainly with a lot of protocols in place. But we may need to come back and discuss about certain various, settings or programs that might need a little bit more touch. So let's kind of do that. But I really appreciate you guys joining me today. You've been listening to Comal ISD Radio. Join us next time as we talk more about special education, more also about the operation of our schools on a day-to-day basis in terms of what it will look like, and certainly more safety protocol discussions. I know your favorite topic out there. So thanks for joining in today.